The autumn rain drummed steadily against the windows of Riverside Shopping Center as 19-year-old twins, Ashley and Megan Porter, made their way through the crowded mall corridors. It was October 15th, 2002, and the sisters had driven down from Hartwell College to shop for Halloween costumes for the big campus party that weekend. Ashley, with her infectious laugh and spontaneous nature, held up a glittery witch costume, while Megan, ever the practical one, examined the price tag with her characteristic frown. "Come on, Meg. It's our senior year," Ashley pleaded, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief as she twirled the costume's cape dramatically. "After graduation, we'll be stuck in boring corporate jobs wearing grey suits every day. This might be our last chance to be completely ridiculous." Megan rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. Despite their contrasting personalities, the twins were inseparable. They'd shared everything since birth: the same crib, the same bedroom decorated with matching pink bedspreads, the same circle of friends, and even the same major in business administration. Now, just months away from graduation, they were planning to move to Boston together and start their careers in the financial district. Before we continue with this mysterious and heartbreaking story, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. We love connecting with our global audience who shares our fascination with these unsolved cases. The security footage from that rainy Saturday afternoon would later become the cornerstone of a 22-year mystery that would consume an entire family and perplex investigators across multiple states. The grainy black and white images captured the twins leaving fantasy costumes at exactly 3:45 p.m., their arms laden with shopping bags, Ashley's long auburn hair catching the fluorescent lights as she gestured animatedly to her more reserved sister. They walked purposefully toward the mall's east exit, where Ashley's silver Honda Accord waited in the parking lot, completely unaware that these would be their final moments captured on camera. What transpired next would haunt their mother, Linda Porter, for over 2 decades of sleepless nights and unanswered prayers. The twins simply vanished without a trace. Their car was discovered 4 days later in the exact same parking space, keys still dangling from the ignition, their Halloween costumes scattered across the back seat, along with half-eaten pretzels from the food court. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses to their disappearance, no ransom demands, and no logical explanation for why 2 responsible college seniors with bright futures would abandon their vehicle and disappear into thin air on a routine shopping trip. Linda remembered every detail of the phone call that shattered her carefully ordered world. She'd been in her kitchen that Sunday evening, preparing her famous pot roast while humming along to an old Eagles song on the radio, when the telephone rang with unusual urgency. The caller was Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the twins' resident advisor at Hartwell College, her voice tight with concern as she explained that Ashley and Megan hadn't returned to their dormitory. They had missed their mandatory floor meeting, skipped dinner in the dining hall, and weren't responding to repeated calls on their cell phones. Linda's hands had trembled uncontrollably as she gripped the receiver, her maternal instincts screaming that something catastrophic had occurred. The initial police response was immediate and comprehensive. Detective James Rodriguez, a 25-year veteran of the County Sheriff's Department with an impressive track record of solving missing persons cases, launched an extensive search operation within hours of receiving the report. By dawn the next morning, over 60 officers were methodically combing through every inch of the shopping center and surrounding areas, interviewing witnesses, reviewing security footage from dozens of cameras, and following up on even the most seemingly insignificant tips from concerned citizens. The twins had absolutely no history of erratic behavior or running away from their responsibilities. They were exemplary students maintaining perfect grade point averages, active in campus organizations, and beloved by their professors and classmates alike. Ashley served as treasurer of the business club, while Megan volunteered at the local animal shelter every weekend. They had never been involved with drugs, had no secret romantic relationships that might complicate their lives, and maintained regular contact with their family. Their disappearance made absolutely no sense to anyone who knew them. Patricia and her husband Michael threw themselves into the search effort with desperate, all-consuming determination. They organized volunteer search parties that methodically scoured every square mile of countryside within a 100-mile radius, distributed over 50,000 missing person flyers throughout the tri-state area, established a dedicated phone hotline for tips, and offered a substantial $50,000 reward for any information leading to their daughter's safe return. The local and regional media coverage was extensive and sustained, with the story of the vanishing Porter twins capturing public attention and generating thousands of tips from concerned citizens across the entire eastern seaboard. As the weeks slowly turned into months with no breakthrough developments, the initial intensity of the investigation began to inevitably wane, despite Detective Rodriguez's continued dedication to the case. He personally followed every single lead, no matter how unlikely or far-fetched it seemed, interviewing hundreds of potential witnesses and pursuing tips that came from locations as distant as California, Texas, and even Canada. A gas station attendant in Virginia claimed to have seen two young women matching the twins' exact descriptions, purchasing snacks and acting nervous around midnight on the day they disappeared. A motel manager in South Carolina reported that two guests had checked in under assumed names that were strikingly similar to Ashley and Megan's. A truck driver insisted he had given a ride to two college-aged twins who were trying to get to Florida to start new lives away from their controlling parents. Each potential lead was investigated thoroughly and meticulously, consuming countless hours of detective work and raising the family's hopes repeatedly, but none yielded any concrete evidence or brought them any closer to understanding what had actually happened to Ashley and Megan. The constant cycle of hope and disappointment began taking an increasingly severe toll on the Porter family's emotional and psychological well-being. The devastating strain of their daughter's unexplained disappearance began systematically destroying every aspect of the Porter family's previously stable existence. Michael, who had worked as a successful construction project manager for over 15 years, found himself completely unable to concentrate on even the simplest work tasks, making costly and dangerous mistakes that eventually resulted in his termination from a job he had loved and excelled at for years. Linda quit her position as head librarian at the local elementary school to dedicate every waking moment to searching for the twins, spending 18-hour days on the phone with investigators, coordinating volunteer search efforts, and maintaining the missing persons website she had created to keep their story in the public eye. Their marriage, which had been strong and loving for over 23 years, began showing serious fractures under the enormous weight of grief, guilt, and the constant uncertainty about their daughter's fate. They found themselves snapping at each other over trivial matters, unable to discuss anything without the conversation eventually returning to Ashley and Megan. Michael began staying late at temporary construction jobs, using physical exhaustion as an escape from the painful reality waiting at home. Linda became obsessed with missing persons cases from around the country, spending countless hours on internet forums dedicated to unsolved disappearances, networking with other devastated families who had experienced similar tragedies. By 2005, the case had officially been classified as cold, meaning that all active leads had been exhausted and no new evidence was being generated. Detective Rodriguez retired that spring, passing the thick case file to his replacement with a heavy heart and a solemn promise to the Porter family that he would never stop thinking about Ashley and Megan, and that he would immediately contact them if any new information ever came to his attention. The intense media attention had gradually shifted to other stories, and the reward fund had been completely depleted on private investigators and psychics who had failed to produce any meaningful results or insights. Linda and Michael were forced to confront the horrifying possibility that they might never know what had happened to their beloved daughters, whether they were alive or dead, suffering or safe, and whether they would ever see them again. This uncertainty proved to be almost more torturous than definitive bad news would have been, because it prevented them from properly grieving or moving forward with their lives in any meaningful way. The years that followed were marked by a devastating series of false hopes and crushing disappointments that repeatedly reopened their emotional wounds. In 2007, human remains discovered in a wooded area 3 counties away were initially thought to potentially belong to the twins, causing Linda and Michael to endure several agonizing weeks of waiting for DNA test results that ultimately proved the remains belonged to a different missing person entirely. In 2010, a woman in Arizona contacted police claiming to be Ashley Porter and asking for help getting home to her family, but she turned out to be a mentally ill individual with a documented history of assuming false identities and contacting families of missing persons with elaborate fabricated stories. In 2013, a man serving time in a federal prison for kidnapping wrote a letter to Linda, claiming he had information about what had happened to the twins. But when investigators followed up, it became clear that he was attempting to trade false information for a lighter sentence on his existing charges. Each incident forced Linda and Michael to relive their trauma, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal and reminding them that their nightmare was far from over. Linda gradually channeled her overwhelming grief and frustration into advocacy work, becoming a passionate and effective spokesperson for missing persons legislation and helping other families navigate the complex and often frustrating world of law enforcement procedures and media attention. She established a support group that met twice monthly at the Riverside Community Center, providing a safe and understanding environment for families dealing with similar tragedies to share their experiences, offer mutual support, and learn from each other's struggles. Among the regular attendees were Carlos and Isabella Herrera, whose 17-year-old daughter had vanished while walking home from her part-time job at a local restaurant, and retired couple William and Dorothy Chen, whose adult son had disappeared during what should have been a routine business trip to Chicago. The support group became Linda's primary lifeline during her darkest moments, offering her a renewed sense of purpose when the pain of loss threatened to completely overwhelm her ability to function. She organized annual memorial services for all the missing persons represented in their group, transforming their collective tragedy into a powerful force for positive change in the community and beyond. Local law enforcement agencies began regularly consulting with Linda on missing persons cases, recognizing her hard-earned expertise and unwavering dedication to the cause. She testified before state legislative committees about the need for improved Amber Alert systems and standardized protocols for investigating adult disappearances. Michael struggled significantly more than his wife to find any meaningful purpose or direction in the aftermath of their devastating loss. He began drinking heavily and steadily, gradually retreating into himself as Linda threw herself completely into activism and advocacy work. Their conversations became increasingly strained and infrequent, focusing mainly on practical household matters, rather than the deep emotional connection and shared dreams that had once defined their relationship and made them such a strong partnership. By 2015, they were essentially living completely separate lives under the same roof, united only by their shared grief over the twins and the gradually fading hope that Ashley and Megan might somehow, someday, return home safely with a reasonable explanation for their prolonged absence. Michael had constructed an elaborate workshop in their basement, where he spent most of his free time building birdhouses and small furniture pieces, using the repetitive manual work as a way to quiet his racing thoughts and avoid confronting the reality of their situation. Detective Rodriguez's replacement, a dedicated and thorough investigator named Captain Lisa Thompson, made it a point to periodically review the Porter case as part of the department's cold case initiative. Thompson brought fresh perspectives and access to new technologies to the investigation, using advanced database searches, improved forensic techniques, and cutting-edge computer analysis to re-examine all the existing evidence with modern tools that hadn't been available during the original investigation in 2002. In 2018, she arranged to have the original security footage digitally enhanced and reanalyzed using sophisticated software, hoping that 21st century technology might reveal crucial details that had been missed or were invisible using the equipment available 2 decades earlier. The process took several months and cost thousands of dollars. But Thompson was determined to leave no stone unturned in her quest to finally solve the mystery that had haunted the community for so many years. The enhanced footage provided significantly clearer and more detailed images of the twins' final known movements through the shopping center, but still offered no obvious new clues about what had happened to them after they left the building. Thompson could observe Ashley and Megan walking through the mall with normal behavior, talking and laughing together, browsing in several stores, sharing a large pretzel at the food court, and eventually making their way toward the parking lot where Ashley's silver Honda Accord waited in space, number 247. Linda watched the enhanced footage dozens and dozens of times, studying every single frame with obsessive attention to detail, searching for some previously unnoticed element that might provide the breakthrough they so desperately needed. She memorized every gesture, the way Ashley unconsciously tucked her hair behind her left ear when she was thinking, how Megan always checked her watch before making any decision, the casual and comfortable way they moved through the crowded shopping center. These images became simultaneously precious final memories of her daughters and sources of constant torment, showing them alive and happy just hours before they vanished forever into an incomprehensible void. Thompson also re-interviewed dozens of witnesses who had been questioned during the original investigation, hoping that the passage of time might have helped them remember additional details, or that new questions might elicit previously unreported information. She worked closely with FBI behavioral analysts to develop new theories about what type of person or persons might have been responsible for the twins' disappearance, exploring possibilities that ranged from random abduction to carefully planned targeting. The breakthrough that would finally crack the case wide open came from a completely unexpected source on a cold and dreary February morning in 2024. Linda was at home organizing materials for that year's memorial service, sorting through boxes of old photographs and newspaper clippings, when she received a phone call that would change everything she thought she knew about her daughter's disappearance. The caller was an elderly woman named Dorothy Kellerman, phoning from a nursing home in Tucson, Arizona, her voice shaky with age and emotion. Dorothy explained that she was the widow of Harold Kellerman, who had worked as the head of security at Riverside Shopping Center during 2002. Harold had passed away from complications related to Parkinson's disease 6 months earlier. But before his death, he had made a shocking and devastating confession to Dorothy about something he had discovered on the night after the Porter twins disappeared. Dorothy's voice broke as she recounted her late husband's story. On the evening of October 16, 2002, Harold had been conducting his routine review of that day's security footage when he discovered something extraordinary that the police had somehow missed during their initial investigation. Instead of immediately reporting his discovery to Detective Rodriguez, Harold had made a fateful decision that would haunt him for the remainder of his life. He removed the tape from the security system and took it home with him. Harold's reasoning: Dorothy explained through tears, had been complicated and ultimately selfish. He had been having a secret affair with a much younger co-worker at the time, and he was terrified that his involvement with the high-profile case would somehow expose his infidelity and destroy his 30-year marriage. He had convinced himself that the information on the tape wasn't crucial to the investigation, and that removing it would protect his personal secret without significantly harming the search for the missing twins. For over 21 years, the VHS tape had remained hidden in Harold's workshop, buried among boxes of old tools and equipment, forgotten and ignored as he struggled with the guilt of his decision. It was only during his final months, as Parkinson's disease gradually robbed him of his physical abilities, but left his mind painfully clear, that Harold had finally confessed the truth to Dorothy and begged her to make things right after his death. Dorothy had discovered the tape exactly where Harold had described it, while cleaning out his workshop following his funeral. When she finally summoned the courage to watch it, she was absolutely horrified by what she saw and immediately understood that she possessed crucial evidence that could potentially solve one of the region's most notorious unsolved cases. However, Harold's death had left her emotionally devastated and overwhelmed, and she had initially been paralyzed by uncertainty about how to proceed. It was only when Dorothy read about Linda's continued advocacy work in a magazine article about cold cases that she realized she had to find the strength to make this difficult phone call, regardless of the potential consequences for her late husband's reputation and memory. She arranged to have the VHS tape overnighted to Captain Thompson, who called Linda within 2 hours of viewing its contents. The forgotten security footage showed a camera angle that had been completely overlooked during the original investigation 22 years earlier, capturing the northwest section of the parking lot where the twins' Honda Accord had been parked. The enhanced images revealed information that fundamentally changed everything investigators thought they knew about the case and opened up entirely new possibilities for what might have happened to Ashley and Megan. The tape clearly showed the twins approaching their silver Honda Accord at approximately 3:52 p.m., exactly as the original investigation had established through other camera angles. However, what the police had never known was that they were not alone in that section of the parking lot. A man in dark clothing had been following them at a distance since they left the shopping center, staying far enough back to avoid appearing in the same camera frames, but clearly tracking their movements with obvious intent. The footage showed this mysterious individual approaching Ashley and Megan just as they reached their car, initiating what appeared to be a brief but intense conversation. Even more shocking was what happened next. Instead of showing signs of distress or attempting to flee from a potentially dangerous situation, both twins appeared to willingly accompany the stranger. Ashley could be seen handing over her car keys to the man, and all three individuals climbed into the Honda together, with the unidentified person taking the driver's seat, while Ashley moved to the front passenger position and Megan got into the back seat. The car then drove slowly out of the camera's limited range, and Ashley and Megan Porter were never seen alive again. The revelation that the twins had apparently gone voluntarily with their eventual abductor completely revolutionized the direction of the investigation and forced everyone involved to reconsider all their previous assumptions about what had actually occurred that October afternoon. Captain Thompson immediately launched the most comprehensive investigation in the department's history, bringing in federal resources and behavioral experts to help identify the mysterious man captured in the previously hidden security footage. The image quality was frustratingly poor, even after extensive digital enhancement, but certain physical characteristics were discernible. He appeared to be middle-aged, approximately average height and build, with dark hair and a confident, authoritative demeanor that suggested he was experienced at approaching and manipulating young people. Thompson worked with FBI behavioral analysts to develop a psychological profile of someone who could successfully convince two intelligent, safety-conscious college students to willingly accompany him to an unknown destination. The consensus among experts was that the perpetrator was likely someone who appeared completely trustworthy and legitimate, possibly posing as a law enforcement officer, security guard, or other authority figure who would naturally command respect and compliance from young adults. The enhanced footage was immediately released to national media outlets, generating an unprecedented response from the public. Linda found herself once again at the center of an intense media storm, fielding hundreds of calls from reporters and appearing on television programs across the country to discuss the dramatic new developments in her daughter's case. The previously hidden security footage was broadcast on every major network, reaching millions of viewers and generating thousands of tips from people who thought they might recognize the mysterious man or have information about the case. Within the first week after the footage's release, Thompson's task force had received over 3,000 tips from across North America. Each potential lead had to be carefully evaluated and investigated, requiring an enormous commitment of resources and personnel. Tips ranged from specific identifications of individuals to general observations about suspicious behavior or vehicles in the area during October 2002. 7 weeks after the tape's dramatic discovery, Captain Thompson received the phone call she had been desperately hoping for. A retired auto mechanic named Robert Davidson had seen the news coverage while visiting his daughter in Florida and immediately contacted the tip line with information about the man in the security footage. Davidson confidently identified the suspect as Vincent Romano, a customer who had regularly brought his white cargo van to Davidson's garage for repairs and maintenance throughout 2001 and 2002. What made Davidson's identification particularly compelling was his vivid recollection of Romano's behavior and the timing of his disappearance from the area. Romano had been known among the garage's staff for his smooth talking and apparent success with young women, often bragging about his romantic conquests and his ability to convince college girls to trust him completely. Davidson remembered that Romano had scheduled routine maintenance on his van for the week following the twins' disappearance, but had never shown up for the appointment and had never returned to the garage again. When Davidson had attempted to contact Romano about the missed appointment and outstanding bills, he discovered that Romano had abruptly moved out of his apartment, leaving no forwarding address and providing no explanation to his landlord or employer. The timing was far too coincidental to ignore, and Davidson's detailed description of Romano's physical appearance matched perfectly with the enhanced security footage. Captain Thompson immediately initiated a comprehensive search for Vincent Romano, a task that proved to be extraordinarily challenging and time-consuming. Romano had essentially vanished as completely as the Porter twins themselves, leaving virtually no trail for investigators to follow. Thompson coordinated with federal law enforcement agencies to expand the search nationwide, utilizing databases and resources that hadn't existed during the original 2002 investigation. The search for Romano consumed the better part of a year and took investigators across dozens of states. They methodically tracked him through a complex series of temporary jobs, short-term housing arrangements, and assumed identities, always arriving months or years too late to actually apprehend him. Romano had worked construction projects in Colorado, tended bar in various Nevada casinos, driven delivery trucks throughout the Pacific Northwest, and held numerous other transient positions, never staying in any location long enough to establish permanent roots or lasting relationships. It became increasingly clear that Romano had been deliberately maintaining a highly mobile lifestyle, possibly specifically to avoid detection by law enforcement. His pattern of behavior suggested someone who was experienced at evading authorities and had probably been involved in criminal activities long before the Porter twins disappeared. The eventual breakthrough came in August 2024, when Romano was arrested in Oregon on charges completely unrelated to the missing persons case. He had been caught attempting to defraud elderly residents of a retirement community out of their life savings through an elaborate investment scam. When his fingerprints were processed through the national database, they triggered an immediate alert for Captain Thompson's investigation. Within 6 hours of the arrest, Thompson was on a commercial flight to Portland, carrying with her the enhanced security footage, 22 years of accumulated evidence, and the desperate hopes of the Porter family for finally learning the truth about what had happened to Ashley and Megan. Vincent Romano, at age 61, bore little resemblance to the confident predator captured on the shopping center security cameras over 2 decades earlier. Years of alcohol abuse, poor nutrition, and the constant stress of life on the run had taken a severe toll, leaving him gaunt, prematurely aged, and suffering from numerous health problems. When Thompson confronted him with the video evidence in the stark interrogation room of the Multnomah County Jail, Romano initially maintained complete denial about any knowledge of the Porter twins or their disappearance. However, faced with the undeniable evidence of the security footage showing him leaving the shopping center with Ashley and Megan, Romano's carefully constructed facade began to gradually crumble. Under relentless questioning from Thompson and federal investigators, his story changed multiple times as he attempted to minimize his involvement and shift responsibility for what had occurred. The truth, when it finally emerged during Romano's 4th day of interrogation, was both tragic and infuriating in its senseless brutality. Romano admitted that he had approached the twins in the parking lot that October afternoon, identifying himself as an undercover federal agent investigating a sophisticated credit card fraud ring operating throughout college campuses in the region. He told Ashley and Megan that their names had appeared in connection with suspicious transactions and that they needed to accompany him immediately to a secure location where they could be properly debriefed and cleared of any wrongdoing. The twins, trusting and law-abiding, had believed Romano's elaborate story and agreed to come with him to what he claimed was a temporary FBI field office where the matter could be resolved quickly and quietly. Romano drove them to a remote cabin he had been renting in the mountains under a false name, continuing to maintain his false identity and elaborate cover story throughout the journey. It was only when they arrived at the isolated property, miles from the nearest neighbor, that Ashley and Megan began to realize they had been deceived. Romano's behavior became increasingly erratic and threatening as he struggled to maintain his impersonation while dealing with the twins' growing suspicion and demands to contact their parents or return to campus. The situation reached a critical point when Megan managed to grab Romano's cell phone and attempted to call 911 for help. In his panic to prevent her from exposing his deception, Romano struck Megan with a heavy flashlight, causing severe head trauma that left her unconscious and bleeding. Ashley screamed and attempted to run from the cabin, but Romano caught her before she could reach his van or find help. Faced with one unconscious twin and another who had witnessed his violent assault, Romano made the calculated decision that would define the rest of his life. Convinced that he couldn't allow either young woman to survive without facing murder charges, he killed both Ashley and Megan and buried their bodies in the dense forests surrounding the cabin. He then drove their Honda Accord back to the shopping center under cover of darkness and abandoned it in the parking lot, hoping investigators would conclude that the twins had disappeared voluntarily. The confession provided Linda Porter with the closure she had desperately sought for 22 agonizing years, but it came at an almost unbearable emotional cost that threatened to destroy what remained of her psychological stability. Her daughters hadn't simply vanished into thin air or run away to start mysterious new lives somewhere else. They had been murdered by a calculating predator who had exploited their trust, their respect for authority, and their desire to do the right thing when confronted with what appeared to be a legitimate law enforcement situation. The knowledge that Ashley and Megan had died, believing they were cooperating with federal agents investigating a crime, made their murders even more tragic and senseless. They had been raised to trust and respect law enforcement, to cooperate with authorities, and to follow rules, all the values that had made them vulnerable to Romano's manipulation. Captain Thompson worked extensively with Romano and federal investigators to locate the remote mountain cabin where the murders had taken place. The property had changed ownership several times since 2002, and the current residents had no knowledge of its dark history. Using ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and extensive manual searching, investigators were eventually able to locate the remains of both twins buried in a shallow grave approximately 75 yards behind the main cabin structure. The recovery of Ashley and Megan's remains brought both profound relief and renewed, devastating grief to the Porter family. Linda finally had her daughters back after 22 years of uncertainty, but not in the joyful reunion she had visualized thousands of times during her darkest moments. The funeral service was held at Riverside Methodist Church, the same church where the twins had been baptized as infants and confirmed as teenagers. The sanctuary overflowed with mourners, including hundreds of people who had never known Ashley and Megan personally, but had followed their story and been touched by their family's unwavering determination to find answers. Vincent Romano was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and faced the possibility of the death penalty under federal law due to the interstate nature of his crimes. At his trial, Linda confronted the man who had destroyed her family and stolen her daughters' bright futures. She delivered a powerful and emotional victim impact statement, describing in detail the 22 years of anguish, uncertainty, and gradually fading hope that Romano had caused through his selfish and evil actions. She spoke about the dreams that had died with Ashley and Megan, Ashley's plan to start her own marketing firm, Megan's goal of becoming a financial advisor, helping families plan for their futures, the grandchildren Linda would never hold, the family gatherings that would forever feel incomplete. She described the toll Romano's crimes had taken not just on her immediate family, but on the entire community that had rallied around the search effort and the hundreds of volunteers who had dedicated countless hours to trying to bring the twins home safely.